The Subcommittee on National Security, the Border, and Foreign Affairs will come to order. I apologize for being a couple minutes late. The Republicans were having a conference, and along with Mr. Biggs and Mr. Perry, we had to stay there a little late because Speaker McCarthy was giving a spellbinding speech, and we couldn't get away. Make sure you tell him I said that. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Good morning and welcome to the witness, Director Marcos. Thank you for your attendance and participation in today's hearing on ensuring the safety of unaccompanied alien children. President Biden's open borders agenda has created a humanitarian crisis that encourages the trafficking of migrant children into the United States. Since the first day he assumed office, President Biden has worked to roll back the deterrence, has focused on policies that worked under the Trump administration to maintain operational control of the southwest border and reducing the number of people who are coming here in the first place. As a federal judge recently commented on the Biden administration, it has effectively turned the southwest border into a meaningless line in the sand and little more than a speed bump for aliens entering this country. The judge stated that the actions of the Biden administration were like posting a flashing "come in, we're open" sign at the southern border. In fiscal year 2021, the Department of Homeland Security made over 1.7 million encounters with inadmissible aliens on the southwest border. In 22, the number rose to 2.4 million. Cartels have exploited President Biden's disastrous border policies to create one of the largest human trafficking and smuggling operations in the world. Cartels charge illegal border crossers a fee for the right to cross through Mexico and across our southern border. Border Patrol agents have told me that the cartels charge $5,000 to $10,000 to individuals from the Western Hemisphere and $18,000 or more for individuals from Asia, including Chinese nationals, for the right to cross our southwest border. While most illegal border crossers are single adults, many are children, more than 250,000 in the past 2 years. And the cartels charge them and their families money as well. Not surprising, with so many more people crossing the southern border, a lot of unaccompanied minors are coming across as well. The Florida Department of Children and Families published results from interviews conducted with 49 unaccompanied children about how they entered the United States. The interviewed children knew little about the individuals who brought them at the southwest border. They just described them as coyotes. So that's what we have. People the kids don't even know, being brought apart by people they don't know. One child detained during her journey in the southwest border, said several members of her group were robbed, attacked by gang members, decapitated, or raped. The child disclosed that she herself was a victim of rape. Again, we have a humanitarian crisis along the border that this administration created. The Department of Health and Human Services has a statutory obligation to care for unaccompanied alien children referred into its custody by the Department of Homeland Security. It must also ensure these children are placed in the care of appropriate sponsors in the U.S. who are capable of providing for their physical and mental well-being. Too often that's not happening. Instead, reports indicate that Secretary Becerra is pushed to instill a culture at ORR that prioritizes, quote, assembly line speed in releasing unaccompanied alien children to poorly vetted sponsors across the country to the detriment of our children's safety. And I'll tell you, it's particularly aggravating to see all these kids come across the border and have the press not cover what's going on when these kids may never see their parents again. And just a few years ago, we had the press screaming about broken families. Director Marcos's predecessor was reportedly threatened with dismissal from what Secretary Becerra considered to be insufficient numerical discharges of unaccompanied children in ORR custody. She resigned shortly thereafter. Reports reveal that many of these poorly vetted sponsors exploit children once in their care. A Florida statewide grand jury identified several abuses of migrant children in sponsors' care. The grand jury found evidence of unaccompanied children fleeing sponsors who were selling them for sex. One was found to have been offered sex to men by her aunt, who she never met before. One unaccompanied child reported that their sponsor had previously been sent for prison for felony battery of a child. They found out that unaccompanied children were dropping out of school and worked to pay cartel debts. Remember, a lot of these kids had to pay their way or go into debt to the cartels to come in this country. You got to think, how are they paying off that debt? A recent New York Times report indicates that nearly 2/3 of all unaccompanied minors work illegal full-time jobs, likely to pay off their debts to cartels for smuggling them into the country and to sponsors for providing basic necessities such as food and housing. Today, I want to find out a little bit more how the unprecedented levels of illegal border crossings, incentivized by President Biden's policies, have led to historic encounters of unaccompanied alien children that have overwhelmed ORR and endangered migrant children. We will also examine ORR's efforts moving forward to ensure adequate care and safe discharge of these children into the care of appropriately vetted sponsors. And we also want to find out what efforts are being made to reunite these children with their parents. In any event, I'd like to recognize my good friend, Ranking Member Garcia, for the purpose of making an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I also want to thank our witness. I know that this is a very difficult job, and I wanted to start first by talking a little bit about the office and the role it plays and how important it is, and then also address some of the concerns that I think many folks, of course, have. First, the Office of Refugee Resettlement has absolutely a critical mission in this country. When I was mayor of Long Beach, ORR actually opened an emergency shelter from right around July 2021. We had about almost 1,600 migrant children that ORR reunited with family or sponsors. I met dozens and dozens of these children at the center. It was a heartbreaking experience, but also I saw firsthand the incredible work that the partners on the ground, the immigration defense attorneys, the social workers, the doctors were doing to assist all of these young children, many of who were scared, wanted to see family, and many also who were very grateful to be here in this country, trying to escape a very difficult situation back home. And so I just first want to thank all of the workers at ORR, who I know do a very, very hard job in this country. But it is important to also note that we are concerned anytime that children are placed in unsafe conditions, and we believe that to be, of course, not just heartbreaking but unacceptable. We want to have sure that we have an agency that supports legal asylum, of course, and folks who come as refugees are not victims of human trafficking. I think we can all agree on that. We also know that these refugees and these children are some of the most vulnerable people that we have, and these people need a helping hand to build their lives. Immigrants, refugees, folks seeking asylum, they make contributions to our community, they make our country stronger. I personally am an immigrant myself. I came as a small child. I know how difficult that process is. And I see these kids just want to have the same opportunities that were given to me and to others in this country as well. Now, one of the most critical things that we do to make sure that we can do is make sure that our Office of Refugee Resettlement is strong, is well funded, and is doing the important work that they have in this country. When an accompanied child arrives at the border, the child is, of course, quickly transferred out of the custody of Homeland Security and into the Office of Refugee Resettlement. The ORR is tasked with placing in the least restrictive settings, best possible, the best interest of the child, while the legal immigration process proceeds. The process allows the Department of Homeland Security to do its job while protecting children. Now, when children are held in government custody, apart from their primary caregivers for long periods, we know that they suffer injury. It's long-lasting injury for these kids. And so we know that studies, we know that our policies to try to connect these kids with their sponsors as soon as possible. We all can agree that kids should not belong in cages. I want to, of course, thank HHS and the White House for transitioning from what was a very difficult period of time for ORR and the way that we actually serve children that were coming into our care. But we also know that we got to get kids out of unsafe shelter conditions and into sponsor homes. I know that about 90% of kids that are in ORR custody end up in sponsors that are direct family, and others are, I believe, other types of sponsors that I know are vetted as best possible through ORR. We do know that by reading recent reports that some kids are being placed in very exploitative conditions. We need to make sure that we have conditions that are safe for all all of our children. And certainly we want to make sure that we have enough trained and qualified managers, social workers that can really cope with the influx that we have of children that arrive at the border. And the plans and systems that are in place to deal with this demand are gone through a process of vetting for sponsors, and that all suspicious partners are flagged. HHS must ensure that immediate follow-up happens when children request assistance regarding labor exploitation or the safety and security of their placement. We also need to have a serious conversation about how we make sure that we're fully enforcing our labor laws and holding corporations accountable when they knowingly and illegally profit from child labor. So I personally support legislation to crack down on these unethical employers. We also want to make sure that unaccompanied children have the full range of services they need, including mental health care to keep them safe. And certainly, and hopefully our colleagues are committed to securing those resources. We want to make sure that we're not attacking asylum, but that we're actually working to ensure that those that are seeking asylum are being treated in a way that's fair and with respect. We also want to make sure that we are focused on increasing funding, that the needs that are real at ORR actually need additional funding support. Right now there are bills being marked up that would actually stop additional funding, that would roll back and eliminate ORR's ability to even do any post-release follow-up. So we know that some of these bills that are moving through the House and the committee process would actually hurt our efforts to make corrections and to improve ORR's capability of supporting children throughout the entire process. We also want to make sure that we're doing everything we can through this committee to be serious about getting funding for the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Labor, a very important cause. So I'm grateful that we have this opportunity to work with you and to make the necessary improvements to ORR as well. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. I'm pleased to introduce our witness today. Robin Dunn Marcos is the Director of the Office of Refugee Resettlement, or ORR as we'll refer to them today, in the Administration for Children and Families at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, a position she's held since September of 2022. I look forward to hearing from Director Marcos today on the very important issues regarding ORR's efforts to ensure adequate care and safe discharge of unaccompanied alien children into the care of sponsors. I don't know if I look forward to it, but we're going to hear about it anyway. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witness will please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Let the record show the witness answered in the affirmative. Okay, now I'll open things up for myself to ask a few questions.
Give an opening statement.
I'm sorry. First, we need your opening statement.
Chairman Grothman, Ranking Member Garcia, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear today on behalf of the Department of Health and Human Services. Since assuming my position of Director of the Office of Refugee Resettlement in September 2022, I've led a dedicated team of professionals who are each committed to ensuring the safety and well-being of every child in our care. I've visited 18 programs and facilities across 7 states where I've met children we serve, some of the dedicated people who serve them, and witnessed the commitment of our staff. Providing for the safety and well-being of children in ORR's care is not only our mandate, it is our guiding principle. Under the Homeland Security Act and Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act, ORR is required to provide for the care and custody of all unaccompanied children following a referral from the Department of Homeland Security or other federal entity until they are released to a vetted sponsor. The Flores Settlement Agreement also establishes minimum service standards for ORR-funded programs. ORR funds nearly 300 programs in 27 states. We provide child-appropriate services, including education, health care, counseling services, case management, recreation, access to legal services, access to religious services, and access to child advocates where appropriate. Given ORR's child welfare mission, we know the best place for a child is with a family in a community, not in a congregate care setting. More than 85% of unaccompanied children released to sponsors in fiscal year 2022 were placed with a close family member, including a parent or legal guardian in more than 1/3 of total cases. Pursuant to the TVPRA, ORR conducts due diligence to identify a sponsor's ability to provide for a child's physical and mental well-being prior to placing a child in their care. ORR seeks to work in the best interest of the child to safely expedite the release of unaccompanied children to a parent, a family member, or other appropriate sponsor, and has thorough screening processes in place for all sponsors. This includes verifying the relationship to the child, speaking with the child's parents, conducting separate interviews with the child and sponsor, collecting and verifying sponsor information and documentation, administering background checks, address verification, public records and sex offender registry checks, as well as FBI checks in certain cases. ORR also conducts home studies as required by the TVPRA or ORR policy, or at ORR's discretion if it may provide additional information about the sponsor's ability to care for the child. While ORR's custodial responsibilities end when a child is discharged, our concern for the child does not. ORR has policies in place to promote children's welfare as they transition into a new community, such as the safety and well-being calls. Although children and sponsors are not required to participate in these calls and may not answer for a variety of reasons, in fiscal year 2022, ORR care providers made contact with either the child, the sponsor, or both in more than 81% of households. In addition, the 24/7 ORR National Call Center connects children and sponsors with resources within their community and is required to report any safety concerns, including suspected human trafficking, exploitation, or abuse. These reports are to ORR, other federal entities, law enforcement agency, and/or Child Protective Services as required. ORR is continually assessing and implementing improvements to the UC program. I'm pleased that the DOL and ACF Memorandum of Agreement formalized in March will further expand our work together. Additionally, ORR has launched an audit that includes two concurrent efforts: a review of unaccompanied children released in 21 and 22 to an unrelated sponsor who sponsored more than 2 unrelated children, and an ongoing review of current vetting requirements for potential sponsors who have previously sponsored unaccompanied children. ORR intends to provide information on the findings from this audit. Furthermore, ORR more than doubled the rate of children provided post-release services in fiscal year 22 compared to fiscal year 21. And we are on track with continued support from Congress to reach our goal of 100% of children receiving post-release services by the end of fiscal year 24. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. Children come through ORR care face unique challenges. ORR is committed to caring for these children and doing everything within the bounds of our authorities and resources to safeguard their well-being following ORR discharge. I'm happy to address any questions you may have about our critical work.
Audio check 1 2 1 2 3 4 testing.
Got it?
We will start in about 1 minute so people can get out of the hall or wherever they are. Okay, very good. In the past administration, we heard a lot about people being separated from their parents, and I do know that cell phones are common all over the place. I know most people who cross the border, the Border Patrol tells me, even from obscure places, they all manage to have cell phones. How many percentage-wise of these unaccompanied kids coming across do we wind up talking to one parent, and what percentage do we wind up talking to both parents?
Thank you, Chairman. We reunite 85% of the kids with close or immediate family.
That's not the question, because some of these close and immediate could be a uncle they've never seen before. What percentage do we talk to one parent, and what percent do we talk to two parents, so the parents know their little children are safe, and so the little children can get advice or counsel from their parents?
Chairman, we do everything we can to speak to child, sponsor, and parent if the parent is not the sponsor. If both parents are available.
Well, percentage-wise, say if we've got a group of 1,000 unaccompanied minors, what percent do you talk to one parent, what percent you talk to two parents, and what percent you talk to no parents?
I will have to get back to you on that.
Okay. Now, we know there are fraudulent identification. Do you ever find fraudulent identification?
Thank you, Chairman. Our vetting processes are done in a way that if there are fraudulent documents, they would be identified in that process. We have a number of steps in place. We verify things with consulates.
Yep. One final thing. It was reported in the New York Times, according to reports, you've lost or no longer know where 85,000 unaccompanied minors are. Was the New York Times article right in that? And how frequently do we check in with these kids who enter here without their parents?
Thank you for that question, Chairman. I'd like to set the record straight. We did not lose anyone. We provide safety and well-being calls between 30 and 37 days after release. ORR's custodial authority ends when they are discharged to a vetted sponsor. However, our concern does not, and we have a number of things in place where we try to maintain contact, and they had the children and families.
Okay. If we say we got a sea of 1,000 people 6 months after they were released, how many of those 1,000 people do we know where they are? Are they still with the sponsors? Or the sponsors who knows where? Of those 1,000, how many do we know where they are 6 months after release?
Thank you, Chairman. ORR does not monitor or track the whereabouts of children after they are released from our care. However, we are very committed to continuing to provide support. Post-release services is our best option to provide continual care for them.
So could the 85,000 number be right that the New York Times has? We don't know where 85,000 unaccompanied minors wound up?
We do not track or monitor.
The answer is no. There are 85,000 kids who came across the border. We don't know. Is that right? Apparently it is.
ORR works within the statutes and authorities and resources provided.
Okay, well, we'll take that to mean we don't know where they are. Okay, now my co-chair, Congressman